Your husband is having an affair. You smelled that perfume or a hint of it. You noticed a change in his attitude. You noticed that your husband has been very different toward you and indifferent toward the marriage. You think that there's something going on. So what do you do next? You check his telephone. You hack into that some way, shape, or form. You read his text messages. You find some text messages. Is it with a coworker? An ex-girlfriend? Somebody that you are friends with? Somebody that you knew from before the marriage? Lo and behold, there are some flirtatious messages. Maybe there are even some invitations for meetups. At conferences when you thought he was away working? At a hotel for rendezvous? There are things that cause you to feel suspicious and alarmed, but maybe there's not quite any evidence yet. You have not found nude photos. You have not found videos of the two of them together. Now you have a hint and a suspicion. If you live in some states with an at-fault divorce program, or an at-fault divorce law rather, then hiring a private investigator, a PI, that might be of some use for your case. That might be required in order to bear the burden of proof that your marriage is broken. If you live in a state such as Florida that is no-fault divorce, then the question shifts. Does your case involve alimony? And do the laws of the state allow any different distribution of marital assets and liabilities if one party has had an extramarital affair? I practice law in Florida, and I can only address this from the perspective of Florida, and here's what it is. Equitable distribution has a catch-all factor, not an element, which is an absolute, but a factor, which is something the court may consider and make a written finding about. And the catch-all factor could apply to an extramarital affair, but maybe not in the way that you think when you feel outraged and enraged over somebody else's extramarital dalliance. For example, if your husband has withdrawn $250, let's say 10 times in the course of a year, $2,500, and you find suspicious charges for meals, hotel rooms, and other forms of entertainment, if you had a private investigator and you had pictures of your husband with another woman or man, whatever your relationship entails, if you had pictures of them with somebody else to match with those charges and those financial withdrawals, then you would be entitled, per equitable distribution, to recover 50% of those monies spent. Or if those are now debts on credit cards, for example, then you realistically should not have to pay for that. I cannot promise you how a judge will rule. I cannot promise you how a court will decide your case. That is for you, your attorney, the judge, etc. What I can say is that in Florida, finding somebody's pictures with another woman, finding somebody's pictures where they're engaging in extramarital affairs with somebody else is not dispositive. In other words, it only impacts your case financially, and only if you can prove it or convince the judge. Even if testimony is enough, that may be enough. If you can convince the judge that you are trustworthy and the other party is not. However, it is not going to radically change your case, and most likely, I should say. It is not going to shift the perspective of your case from 50-50 to, oh man, your husband is such a terrible, terrible person that now he must be punished, and the judge is going to see that, and the judge is going to award him nothing and take everything away. That is not realistic. And that is not what Florida law is about. Florida law is about equitable distribution, not punitive or punishing distribution. When people cheat, it may be despicable, it may be hurtful, and it may destroy a marriage. And I'm sure that most of us who are married would prefer that we never hear about these stories again. And we would prefer that this does not happen as often as it does, because these sorts of things may influence other people's relationships and other people's marriages. And it's really, really hurtful, and it's something that's tough to recover from. But that doesn't always radically shift the landscape of your family law or divorce case. For example, if you have had your spouse cheat on you and you have minor children, but your children have never met that other person involved, it may break up your marriage, but it might not impact your child custody situation because the presumption of 50-50 is not going to necessarily be overcome because your spouse cheated on you. The kids have no idea. The kids have never met them. That other party is not playing any role or influencing your case whatsoever or your life whatsoever, other than the fact that you're now aware of what happened between your spouse and another person. So before you jump to that conclusion of hiring a private investigator or getting the person in flagrante delicto, in other words, in the act of coitus, if you will, I can't really say any epithets or swear words here, profanity, because this is not an explicit show. But just because you might have that evidence doesn't necessarily mean that it influences your case in some substantial way. You might need that evidence to move on or feel validated in your suspicions, and you might feel better just knowing in your mind that there's a certainty to it and that you don't have to torture yourself. But it doesn't have the kind of an impact on a family law case that people unfamiliar with family and divorce law think. Do not let other people egg you on and say, you've got to catch that SOB in the act and you better make sure and he's going to pay. Everybody says things in the heat of the moment that are unkind and hurtful and maybe inflammatory, but that doesn't make it law. As always, everyone, I hope I've educated you a little bit about Florida family law and a little bit about the law in general. Thank you so much, as always, for listening.